Story 1. To set the scene, I'm a semi-professional mountain biker and love exploring. Here's my story. I was bike packing with some buddies in the Northwoods of Wisconsin. We are 2 days into our trip. For those of you who don't know, it's like backpacking or hiking but with bikes. It was early winter but not very snowy, just cold. We were about 3 days into our trip and it was getting dusk out, so we decided to go off the trail a little bit and look for a spot to set up camp. The sun is setting. That's where things got weird. Very, very weird. We saw an area that was in a sort of mini valley, grove, just some little hills about 10 feet each and trees on top of them. It was early winter with barely any snow on the ground. When we started to bike to the grove, the snow started to thicken a lot. It went from 2 inches of snow to 6, then 8, then a foot. There were mostly evergreens and a few trees whose leaves hadn't fallen off all the way yet. We had to walk our bikes through it. We all wanted to turn back and find a different spot. But we had to get to where we were going. It's a biking thing. Lol. As soon as I would think about turning around, I started to think about how nice that mini valley was. It was like something else thinking for me. Kinda like when you're just a little bit drunk. My buddies all kinda just looked at each other as if we all had weird vibes. We pushed onward to the grove, then it started to get very sunny and warm. But the snow stayed at about a foot. It wasn't melting at all. We didn't really notice it at first until my friend, let's call him Jeff, took off his coat. It was like when you hear someone say, "Don't itch your face," and then your face itches. Basically, we all noticed how hot we were and started to sweat, like we were warm, on the inside, but not the outside. It's really hard to describe. When we got to the area, we heard leaves blowing in the trees. It sounded much too loud to be from the few leaves on the oaks and maples. It was early winter, and the closest evergreen was like 100 feet away. And these leaf sounds were right above us. I started to get a really bad feeling about it. It was like the "we aren't supposed to be here" feeling. Most of my buddies didn't notice, but my friend, who we'll call Eric, gave me a look that said, "You feel that too?" We set our gear down and our bikes up against a tree, settled down for a bit and played some games. But after a while it started to get dark, so we set up our tents, our little fold-up stove, and our gear. We talked and drank and smoked some ciggies. We were all having a good time for several hours. My friend Eric recommended that we should get some sleep because of how late it was. We went into our tents and settled down for the night, or they did. There were 2 tents and 3 people in a tent. This is where it got scary. Damn right, spooky fucking shit. After everyone went to sleep, I was working up abruptly. I heard some animals running around the tents for about 10 minutes and got annoyed. So I sat up in my sleeping bag and zipped down the window flappy thing that covers the mesh window, and I saw some coyotes. Okay, no big deal, we're 6 on 4. So I quietly zip up the window flappy thingy and try to go back to sleep. I can't sleep. I wasn't worried about the coyotes, but I knew something else was out there. I had a terrible gut feeling. I felt like I had liquid fear in my veins. That's the only way to describe it. Then I heard a yelp and a whine, then a second later a soft thump. I heard the little coyote's feet running away. It took me a second to register what could have done something like that. Then it clicked, and I was like, okay, shit, oh fuck, oh damn. That's now how things work. I realized that something must have big kicked one. There was an absolutely disgusting smell, like mildew, burnt milk, and body odor. I thought it was a bear or something, so my dumbass, save me the lecture, grabbed the can of bear spray that I kept in my bag, and I grabbed my pistol. I unzipped the tent as fast as could and froze in place. I couldn't move, like physically not being able to move, not because of fear. I don't know exactly what the fuck it was, but the creature was doing it. What I do know is this: it was not a bear. It stood up. It stared at me for like 3 minutes straight. Whatever it was chiseled ASF. Skinny, yet chiseled. Its eyes were black with blue pupils. Its head was like the shape of an upside-down sock. But its cranium jiggled a little bit when it stood up. It was tall, like maybe 15 feet tall. No hair, lanky and skinny. Its skin was in between tan or opaque, but very smooth and shiny. It had long arms and long legs. It was humanoid, that's for sure, but its limbs were oddly proportioned compared to that of a human. Almost dog-like, or cat-like. Its neck was like a foot long, but it looked layered, like gills, but made of skin. It breathed kinda raspy, like an old smoker. It had long-ass curly fingers, no fingernails. Or none that I saw. They just came to a tip, like a pencil tip. Its mouth was circular. I could understand what it was thinking. I could not hear its thoughts. More like its intentions. I hope that makes sense. I couldn't move because it didn't want me to move. It was studying me. It knew what I was thinking. It knew it was gonna shoot at it. It didn't want us to leave. It just wanted to be safe and trusted. It was lonely. It let me go after about 30 seconds. I just sat down on a rock while I stared at it. No matter what, I could not break eye contact with it. I didn't feel like I was in danger. But after its heavy neck breathing and creepy eye contact, I heard a soft, almost anime voice type of whisper in both my ears, and it said, "Green is the color of life, you Matt's got style, baby." Then it looked at me for confirmation, blinked, then said, "Okay, bye now," and then it closed its eyes. While it did this, I felt like there were green eye drops in my eyes. As soon as its eyes opened again, the greenwash was gone, and it took off into the woods, ridiculously fast, like 30 mph. There was a line of kicked-up snow that followed the creature where it went, but no footprints. I didn't dare follow it. I don't know what it was, but I slept very well that night. When I woke up, my buddy Jeff, who was in the other tent, said he had a dream that perfectly described the whole thing. He said he felt like it was real. I told him it was, and explained it from my POV. Everything was fairly normal after that, aside from guttural screeching in the middle of the night, and me and Jeff being thoroughly spooked. Story 2. I had freshly turned 18 and was working a closing shift at a small cafe in a grocery store. One of my regular customers comes in, Tom. Tom was a hugger. He'd come in and call out, "Where's my girls?" And we'd all have to awkwardly hug this 80-year-old man while he whispered, "God bless you," in your ear. I hated Tom. He always held on a little too long and whispered a little too close. On this shift, I was closing alone and Tom came in at about 4 p.m. Not unusual, I dealt with the creepy and got him his coffee and bagel. He was with his wife this time. She was sweet but tired looking. He started asking me questions as I worked. What do I have to do at night? Is it hard closing alone? What time am I off? Do I ever get scared walking to my car in the dark? The questions got progressively more uncomfortable, and his wife just sat there silently. I answered as friendly as I could, despite the hair on the back of my neck standing up. I would catch him staring at me often. It was okay though, I was off work at 7, so it wasn't a big deal. Until he didn't leave. His wife went home without him, and he just stayed staring for hours. I asked if there was anything else he needed, and he said, "No, I'm just waiting for you to get off of work." He wanted to walk me to my car, he said, because young girls shouldn't be in a dark parking lot alone. I told him it wasn't necessary and continued about my work, ignoring him now, even as he stared. He left about 15 minutes before my shift ended, into the dark Michigan winter, and I breathed a sigh of relief. I didn't think twice when I punched out and headed to my car. I grabbed my snow brush and began clearing my car, enjoying the quiet that's unique to a snowy night. I began to hear the crunching of footsteps behind me. I brushed it off. I was in a parking lot after all. But they get closer, past any other car and directly towards my car, parked away from the others in employee parking. I look, and it's Tom, maybe 50 feet away, and smiling. He tells me that I should have looked for him. He had been sitting outside waiting for me, and I should know it's dangerous for young girls to be alone in a parking lot at night. I began shaking. I tried to open my car door, but it was frozen shut due to the earlier storm. Tom came closer, calling me a stupid girl and asking God to forgive him. I debated running back into the store. He was so old he surely couldn't keep up, right? I didn't want to chance it though. He could have been younger, as I'm a terrible judge of age, and I'm not exactly fast myself considering my weight. So I stand my ground. I fumble in my purse for my pepper spray, thankfully attached to my keys. I tell him to stay back, I have pepper spray, and to go home to his wife. He glowers at me. I show him the tea canister. We're about 15 feet apart now. He's well within range. He calls me a bitch, spits at me, and heads back into the store. I get in my half-uncovered car and drive home, terrified. I called the store when I got home, only a mile and a half away, so about 2 minutes, and told them what had happened. They kicked Tom out and told him not to come back. He began cursing up a storm and his wife had to come pick him up. He ended up getting arrested for child pornography a couple of years later, but I don't know the details as I had moved away at that point. Can't say I'm sad to see him go though. Story 3. This story took place on a Danish highway with lots of traffic. I was riding my motorcycle and pulled over at a rest stop. The stop only had a parking lot and a toilet, no gas station or anything, and was hidden from view from the highway by trees. As I stopped, there was only one car in the parking lot. A man was standing next to it. He came over and I thought he was just a tiny bit strange. He told me he was a German chemistry professor but did not look the type. He had been sleeping in the trunk of his station wagon, and when he left through the rear hatch he had left the keys inside and the car was locked. He wanted to borrow my phone to call for assistance, and I let him use it. After the phone call, I was still talking to him, and he told me about the trip he was on. I was more or less trying to end the conversation when a run-down van with graffiti on it stopped next to us. Out comes a man who looked a bit off, like a mix of 80s denim jacket gang member and a drug dealer. He opened with, "How much is that motorcycle worth?" I found that slightly threatening. He kept on talking about how nice my bike was, as well as telling me his life story. He told me he was a West German truck driver in the 80s, driving a route to East Germany. He had an East German girlfriend whom he met every time he was there. But they were discovered by Stasi, and he never saw her again. He was convinced she was killed by Stasi because of her relationship with him, West German. At that point, he had moved to Norway and worked there as a butcher for 10 years. But then some things happened in my life, and I joined the Foreign Legion. Now people don't just join the French Foreign Legion. The way he said it made me think he was saying that he did some serious crime, but escaped the police prison by joining the Legion, which is apparently a thing. Now, at this point, I was 100% convinced he was bullshitting me. I just did not understand what he was trying to achieve. Did he want to steal my bike, or my wallet, or phone? Meanwhile, the professor wanted to leave so badly, but he was still locked out of his car. Me and the crazy dude spoke partly Danish Norwegian, so he did not understand what we were talking about. But I guess you could say he understood enough to be a bit frightened. I wanted to pull on this crazy guy's strings a bit, so I asked him about something I'd heard about the Foreign Legion. They give you a dog, and you have to care for the dog and have it as a pet, and then they make you kill it and eat it. He told me, nope, that's not true, it's a rabbit, not a dog. And then he kept talking about it in a way that was very, very convincing. And then he pulls the ace out of his sleeve. Literally. He pulls up his sleeve and reveals a tattoo of a legionnaire of the French Foreign Legion, in uniform, covering his whole arm from elbow to wrist. I mean, non-legionnaires don't have that. I was still trying to figure out what he wanted. He had still not asked what me and the professor were waiting for, but just then, a roadside assistance truck arrived to help the professor, and the crazy guy realized the situation, and then became annoyed because if he had known, he could have picked the car door lock in seconds. I have equipment for it in my car. Anyway, the professor and the crazy legionnaire became occupied with the locked car and the arrival of the roadside assistance truck, and I got on my bike and noped the heck out of there. At the end of the day, I think he was genuinely a legionnaire, butcher, and truck driver. I think he was a lonely guy, just looking for conversation, but no longer used to civilian-friendly conversation. I'm sure he had hundreds of interesting stories to tell, but I would prefer to hear them in a less isolated place than a Danish rest stop. Story 4. This happened on my shift, graveyard. I was helping another short-staffed store across town. A woman came in. She seemed a little frazzled and was carrying a Bible, but otherwise, she seemed fine. She buys some chips and starts talking to me about crazy coronavirus stuff. Then she tells me at an evil spirit pretending to be a clove of garlic. I of course think she's just messing with me, but no. She pulls out a piece of garlic, lays it on the counter, and starts telling me it isn't garlic and is in fact a demon that wanted to possess her. She then starts asking me if I believe in spirits or if I can see them, because despite looking like I'm one of the humans that's a third demon, I'm really a human who's a third angel who was sent to Earth to help her expel the evil spirits and urges she feels, and that it's okay if I didn't know it because she can see it, and she leaves the garlic on the counter and tells me that she'll wait for me to deal with it. Now that's pretty much where the original incident ended. A few days later, about 2 a.m., maybe 2:15-ish on a Tuesday, I'm working the graveyard shift at my usual store when this woman pops up again. She proceeds to just buy some candy and sort of hang out asking me about jade, the jewelry type, and incense, and if we've met before. Nothing as weird as before. Now the weird thing is, I didn't hear or see her come in before she approached the counter. We have a loud-ass siren thing that turns on when the doors are opened and only shuts off when they're closed. This is normally not a big deal, but considering I'd been stocking and cleaning in the front the whole time and had only gotten 2 or 3 customers beforehand, yeah, it was a bit weird. She hangs out a bit longer, then rushes to the restroom and doesn't walk out of it till about 6. Says have a nice day and just walks out of the store like nothing. This freaks me the fuck out because I cleaned the restrooms a little bit after she went in, and she somehow managed to slip out or hide somewhere when I went to clean them. Outside of hiding in the stalls, there is nowhere to hide in the restrooms and there are no windows to slip out of. And like a jackass, I looked up at the top of the stalls and at the ceiling thinking she had pulled a Spider-Man, but nope, she just poof. Disappeared, then reappeared and left, super casual a couple of hours later. TL, Dr. Customer told me she ate a demon trapped in garlic and I was half angel. Then a few nights later she shows up again, pulls a Houdini in the bathroom, randomly exits the restroom, and leaves the store a couple hours later. Story 5. An old job I had was located on an industrial estate in the middle of an expansive, abandoned, and disused airfield. One of those places where even when the sun shone, if the estate was quiet, it was eerie. It was a small business, and because of the nature of the work, the main bulk got done in the morning, leaving the afternoons quiet and therefore only manned by 1 or 2 members of staff. On this particular day, it was just me as my colleague was out at a meeting. It was a sunny, normal day, and I'd been in the midst of doing very little, as you do when left to your own devices in a quiet office, when I decided to take a break to pee. Now, because of the weird layout of the building, to get to the toilets, you went downstairs, took a right at a crossroads, the front door on your left, through the, at that point, empty warehouse, and followed the loop, leaving you directly under the main office. So there I am, having a grandiose wee when I hear the front door open and close. At this point, I'm not fussed. My colleague is due back in, so it's most likely them, and if it's not, it'll be one of the drivers anyway, who quite often pop in and out. As I finish up and flush the toilet, I peer out the small window behind the loo to scout our section of the car park and just see who's arrived. Only, there are no cars bar mine. That's kinda odd, and I'm a little unsettled, but I shake the feeling off by figuring it's a nice day, could just be a driver has walked around. As I move to the sink and start washing my hands, the floorboards above my head start making the very familiar creaks and groans of somebody ascending the stairs, and I can tell exactly where they are by the sound of which stairs they're putting weight on, so somebody's definitely in and heading to the office. For some reason, the weird unsettling feeling of earlier starts coming back over me, so I finish up doubly quick time and come out of the toilets just as the main floorboard of the office creaks. I'm calling out all the time as I take the loop back around and through the warehouse. As I reach the bottom of the stairs, there's nobody on them, and as I say, all the time I've been walking, I've been calling out, figuring whoever it is would most likely stop and hang back to wait for me. But there's nobody. Now really creeped out, at the foot of the stairs I call out again, just in case they haven't heard, expecting somebody to poke their head around the main office door. Nobody does. There's just silence. By this point, I'm petrified. I'm on my own, in the middle of nowhere, and somebody has decided to play peekaboo in this building. With my heartbeat pounding in my ears, I take the first few steps. Alongside the stairs, there's a downstairs office and a small window that allows you to peek into the room. I check that. There's nobody in there. I carry on up, now fully on guard. At the top of the stairs, there's another crossroads, the main office on the right and the conference room with shut door on the left. I reach the landing of the stairs, fully tensed, with my keys in between my closed fist. I turn the corner. There's nobody there. The office is empty. But I have 100% heard somebody come in and up the stairs. The door is so heavy that the sound of it opening or closing is unmistakable, plus the same for the floorboards, which always give away someone's movements. All the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The only place somebody could be is directly behind me, in the closed-door conference room, and there's no way I'm opening that. The room is massive and pitch black. I leg it downstairs just as my colleague pulls into the car park. I explain the whole thing to him, and together we brave the conference room. He pushes the door open. I hit the lights. Nobody. We scour the warehouse, even though there's no way that somebody could have got out. The shutter doors are down and locked. We check every room, everywhere. Nobody. To this day, it's the creepiest thing that I ever experienced in the building. I know what I heard. There was no way it could have been wind or heating because the floorboards make specific noises when people are on them. I'd know. I'd heard them enough times. There was no way that anybody could have gone past me, whether in the warehouse or not, as the corridor is so small. I would have seen them or heard the door click again when they left. I've got no explanation. All I know is I heard it. Story 6. I used to work at a coffee place. We opened at 5 in the morning, but we were there at 4:30 to set up. We closed at 8 p.m. and left by 8:30 or 9, depending on when we finished cleaning up. One night a week was a deep, clean session, so we'd leave closer to 9:30 or 10. I did my fair share of both opening and closing in my almost 4 years there, and definitely saw some pretty interesting folks in all that time, especially when opening. Lots of homeless people who were sadly mentally disabled or drug addicted. We were in a part of town that was not as nice as it used to be. One morning when I was opening, me and my opening barista, I was the supervisor at the time, were the only ones in the store. I was in the back of the store setting up some tips. She was in the front brewing coffee and tea and so on. Suddenly she started screaming bloody murder. I grabbed a box cutter and ran to the front. She had been cleaning a drain on the ground by the sink right next to the drive-through window. She had been bent down, but when she stood up again, there was a man in with his face pressed to the window, literally inches away from her just through the glass. He was just staring at her with this huge, super terrifying grin on his face, just up against the glass. He was super dirty and messy, and for some reason had a pink blanket wrapped around his shoulders. As my barista was screaming and crying, mostly shocked from how quickly he'd randomly appeared and how close he was to her, he started cackling like it was funny. I don't really know why, but that pissed me off so bad. I didn't want to open the window, obviously, so I just told my barista to go into the back of the store and made eye contact with the guy through the window, scowled as hard as I could, and pointed down the street and yelled, "Fuck off now." He looked totally taken aback at first, but then kinda stumbled away down the street. He lingered on the block for a long time, but eventually left for good. I kept an eye on him for a while, and then went and calmed down my barista. Another time, I was opening with a different barista. For reference, I'm an average-sized female, my early 20s. This barista I was opening with is a late 30s male. When we opened the store, we'd wait in the parking lot for the other person to get there, one barista, one supervisor, and then walk into the store together. I arrived before him. When he got there, he parked a few spaces away from me. His car is black and small, so it could be hard to notice in the dark and from a ways away. When I realized he was there, I got out of my car to meet him. He left his car too, and was walking towards me when he suddenly started yelling, "Get the fuck away from her," and running at me super fast. I heard footsteps run away from behind me and was super shocked. Apparently, someone had been hiding behind my car, waiting for me to get out. They hadn't noticed my coworker show up and were scared off by him, thank God, 'cause I didn't even notice anyone was there. A few weeks later though, when I was closing with a different barista, it happened again. My barista's partner was picking her up from work that night and was waiting in the parking lot since she got there a little early. Luckily, my barista partner was also a cop. She noticed someone was crouched behind my car and called her partner to tell her to tell me what was going on, then went to investigate and shoo the guy away. As soon as he saw her, he ran away again. My barista and her partner both walked me to my car though, just to be safe. Story 7. Back in September of 2017, I loaded some camping gear onto the back of my bicycle and spent the next 20 days riding almost 2,300 miles clockwise around Lake Michigan, starting and ending at my home in south central Wisconsin. I didn't really like paying to sleep in the ground, so instead of paying for proper campsites, about an hour before dark, I'd just start looking for somewhere I could disappear into the woods or something to pitch my tent. As the second day neared its end, I was riding on a gravel bike trail that paralleled a small highway between two little towns. I started looking for a place to camp, and before long, I found what I thought would be a decent place. A small grass road crossed the bike trail. To the left, it connected to the highway. To the right, it led to a clearing with maybe 8 or so semi-truck trailers. Although the trailers themselves were overgrown with grass and weeds, indicating they hadn't moved in years, there were decently maintained paths between them, and in some places, the trailers blocked those parts from view in 3 directions, including from the road. So despite my slightly uneasy feeling about the place, I set up my tent. In the final few minutes if twilight, I was sitting in the tent, eating dinner and writing in my journal, when suddenly I heard the squeak of an old door hingy, followed a moment later by the banging sound of a door being violently swung shut. Now, I mentioned earlier that I was already a little bit uneasy about the place. It was a bit creepy, but in a cool way. When I heard that sound, it very much amplified my uneasy feeling about the place. My mind jumped to all kinds of confusion about how it must have been somebody living in one of those trailers coming out, and it was only a matter of a few moments before he'd see my tent. I decided to get the hell out of there. I broke down my tent in record time, loaded everything onto the bike, and continued on by the light of my headlamp. As it was now pitch black out, maybe a mile down the bike path, I found another clearing in the woods, this one without creepy abandoned trucks, and pitched my tent once again, before having a peaceful and uneventful night's sleep. In hindsight, I realized the noise was likely just an unlatched trailer door swinging in the breeze. But even so, the place was freaking creepy, and I was almost looking for a reason to break down my tent and continue on. That noise ended up being exactly the reason I needed it.
The end. Thanks for watching. Don't leave before leaving a like to this video. Also hit the subscribe button to support my work. And as always, have a horrific nightmare, my dear.